Bey is back, and you've got him. Yes, I was away, for about 20 days, and so much has changed in that point of time. I just got back a day and a half ago, and I was thinking of skipping this podcast because, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, but so much has changed that I just felt compelled to talk about it. Albert Reinoso, the producer of the podcast, did you miss me?
I always miss you, you know that.
All right, but I did call you from New York.
You did.
All right. So, I was away for 30 days. So many things have happened. Not 30 days, 20 days. But so many things have happened in just a little over the year. Do you remember the Supreme Court started its session 370 days ago? And in that short period of time, just 5 days more than a year, they have overturned precedents about affirmative action, precedents about abortion, changed so many of our lives. In fact, there was a new poll from ABC News, and people were asked, do you see the Supreme Court now as a political entity, not as a judicial entity? And this is what they replied: that the Supreme Court is there to enforce partisan political views. 53%, a majority of Americans. 33% say they're there to enforce the law, a small sliver. And 14% just say, I don't know. Another poll on CNN, people were asked, which governmental entity has most changed your life in the last year? Was it President Joe Biden in the executive branch? Was it Congress in the legislative branch? Or was it the Supreme Court? Well, it was a telephone poll, so take that into consideration. But more than 30,000 people answered, and over 70% of them said it was the Supreme Court that had the most effect on their daily personal lives. A court that most people see as partisan, and a court that most people see was created through a conservative partisan entity and a process that denied Obama appointing another Supreme Court justice. Trump got 3. So what's changed? The court has changed. America hasn't changed. The world hasn't changed, but the court has changed America. Now, I'm going to get to some of those court decisions in a few moments, but first, I've got to comment on this. There throughout the Republican primary, and especially with Ron DeSantis, there's been this emphasis on creating the other, the woke people, the transgender people, the gay people, the drag queen people. And the latest DeSantis campaign commercial, all right, it starts out as an attack on Trump, saying that he is gay friendly and transgender friendly. Take a look at this.
I'll do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens.
If Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her using any bathroom she chooses.
That is correct.
In the future, can transgender women compete in Miss Universe?
Yes.
Make America great again.
All right, that would be sort of bad enough because it's enough to give you a headache. But the ad then continues to beef up Ron DeSantis as the masculine man. And, it's on the level of a comic book, but I really just don't understand it. And I want to talk to Albert about this when we come back. But this is the second part of that political ad. Take a look at this.
I cannot think of anything more vilified.
It really has shut down rag just produced some of the harshest, most draconian laws that literally threaten trans existence. Congratulations, Rob Hussein. Mission accomplished. You win.
Oh. Oh, they could show that to terrorists at Guantanamo and get them to confess everything. I mean, does that seem like brainwashing? But it's like, remember Clockwork Orange, where Malcolm McDowell had his eyes popped open with toothpicks or something so he could be changed from violent to a peaceful, a docile person? I mean, that's what these images and that sound is like. And it's almost ironic, considering the masculine figures that he wants to identify with. Christian Bale from American Psycho, who was a murderer and a sadist. The Wolf of Wall Street, who was a criminal and a misogynist. The character played by Cillian Murphy on Peaky Blinders, who murders people left and right. That's masculinity? I mean, Albert, do you have any explanation for this?
When you first sent me that link, I maybe it's my age. I have no idea what the message of that ad is. None whatsoever.
It's supposed to be these are real men, and those are not.
Number one,
drag queens.
Goes by so fast, I don't understand what they're trying to get at. And number two is, when I first saw it, I thought it was an anti-DeSantis ad because he doesn't look good at all. And the quotes that I see are negative quotes.
Yeah, I know, but they're negative quotes because they're negative quotes criticizing him because he's anti-gay. Now, the beginning of the ad, Trump, as president, forbade transsexuals from being part of the military. So it's not like he's the trans best friend or the gay's best friend, but he does play, I've never understood this either. He plays macho man at his rallies, which is the Village People, a gay group, which is sort of satirizing the hyper masculinity in our culture, right?
I don't think that a lot of the people that are putting these ads together, or certainly the politicians themselves, I don't think they have a clue as to what society is about and what the icons of society are now or in the past. I don't think they know. Just like the Bushes never knew what the price of milk was, this is the same thing. They don't have a clue on what.
Yeah, they're detached. They're detached from reality, is what we all know. No, okay. So, Trump playing macho man and these people dancing around who don't like gays, who are anti-trans, and they're dancing to the Village People who are icons satirizing male masculinity in our culture. It's all ironic. Now, when I was in New York, I visited one of my favorite museums, the New York Historical Society, and they had an exhibit on gay life in New York City, and specifically about an artist called J.C. Leyendecker, who for the first half of the 20th century created icons of American masculinity. He had football players, big muscled rowers. He had sailors. He was the guy responsible for, maybe you remember seeing these, the Arrow shirt men who were muscles were like bulging through their shirts. Well, it turns out that J.C. Leyendecker was a gay man who lived with his lover for most of his life. And even though Teddy Roosevelt praised him, saying, he has created the epitome of American male masculinity in the common man, and others said, this is a celebration of the vital masculinity of American life, he was a gay man. And I really burst out laughing when I came across this ad that he created, because how could you be more obvious? Come on, man. I looked at that and said, I mean, you're just giving it away right there. And in this exhibit, they had a video of gay life in Manhattan that dissected it into parts of the island. They had gay life in Harlem, gay life in Midtown, gay life in the Village. And they had this picture, which made me think, le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose. There are drag queens being thrown in the paddy wagon in 1928. 1928. They were part of a play called Pleasure Man, produced by Mae West. And they didn't just arrest the drag queens, they actually arrested 52 actors as indecent. But there are the drag queens being thrown in a paddy wagon. All right. So this is not something totally new. So what is a real man? I want to show you a real man. A man who is grounded in reality, who doesn't have to prove his masculinity with bulging biceps or a ripped abdomen or a chiseled face with a strong jaw. No, it's a man who uses his brain and is probably one of the most, no, he's not probably, he is the most articulate member of the American political scene. Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, was asked on one of the Sunday shows for his reaction to that egregious ad that we can't make any sense of. Here's Pete Buttigieg on television responding.
Your reaction to that video?
You know, I'm going to choose my words carefully, partly because I'm appearing as secretary, so I can't talk about campaigns. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to leave aside the strangeness of trying to prove your manhood by putting up a video that splices images of you in between oiled up, shirtless bodybuilders, and just get to the bigger issue that is on my mind whenever I see this stuff in the policy space, which is, again, who are you trying to help? Who are you trying to make better off? And what public policy problems do you get up in the morning thinking about how to solve? You know, we're focused as an administration on how to get things done to make people better off. I spent my week traveling around the country to places that are benefiting from infrastructure funding. We were in Appalachia, in an eastern Kentucky community that's been wiped out by floods repeatedly, and we're bringing them highway funding that's going to help them not only improve the road, but also improve the dam and protect them from floods in the future. A few weeks ago, we were in North Dakota, where there's a railroad crossing that was a community headache for decades. And thanks to President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure funds, we finally have the resources to do something about it. And we're going to make that better and have it not be a problem holding back first responders. These are the kinds of problems that most of us got into government, politics, and public service in order to work on. And I just don't understand the mentality of somebody who gets up in the morning thinking that he's going to prove his worth by competing over who can make life hardest for a hard-hit community that is already so vulnerable in America.
Now, that's a real man, in my opinion. In fact, if I may be so bold as to say, I have a man crush on Pete Buttigieg. And if this country should ever be so lucky to have him run and win a position in the White House as president, I would be fully supportive of him. All right.
As would I. And,
okay.
and the only thing wrong with him being president is it's tough to say his name. Other than that, perfect guy.
Oh, there's one more thing. He's a gay man.
Oh, yeah. So?
All right. All right. So that was Pete Buttigieg. But, the DeSantis campaign isn't finished with this yet. Remember, what was it, George Bush? It's an infamous ad, the Willie Horton ad. And people said, oh, this was there to stir up fear, resentment, and hatred towards Black Americans. Remember the Willie Horton ad, during the Bush Dukakis, this is Bush, the father, Dukakis campaign, and it was notorious. But in this campaign, No, people did react. Even the log cabin Republicans who are gay conservatives. I wonder what Peter Thiel, who gives his billions of dollars to conservatives, I wonder what he thought of that ad, Mr. DeSantis. But we do know who sprang to his defense when there was criticism of the Ron DeSantis ad. His lovely wife, a former broadcaster who knows how to use the camera, but she came up with this backup ad for the homophobia in the DeSantis campaign.
Erica,
take a look at this.
We've witnessed a lot and put up with enough.
You guys gotta go.
Let's go. He is arresting her for being on a public playground. Her kids are here. What are
We've been forced into silence. Into compliance. Enough is enough. When you come after our kids, we fight back. Because there's nothing we won't do to protect our children. They're not yours.
These are our kids.
Our nation's children are all our children.
We will not allow you to exploit their innocence to advance your agenda. And we have finally found our fighter.
We're not going to let you impose an agenda on our kids. We're going to stand up for our kids.
We must restore sanity in our society. We need every mama and every grandmama in every corner of the country to stand up and fight back by electing Ron DeSantis President of the United States of America.
Oh, man. Okay, right. Why is there always this pounding, relentless music? Is that supposed to make us think that this is all important? I don't know why those gay marchers said that. They were probably being sarcastic and, wanted to, troll those right-wingers who see gay Americans as groomers, and there is these tunnels everywhere where children are being kidnapped and groomed, like the guy at Comet Pizza who went down to free the children that Hillary Clinton was abusing and killing. I mean, it's just craziness. But I think that the DeSantis should share the Julius Streicher Award. Julius Streicher, you remember, was the guy responsible for demonizing Jews in Nazi Germany in his newspaper with all sorts of distortions about them. They should get the Julius Streicher Award for demonizing a group of human beings for political advantage. On the other hand, Trump is just putting his toe into this controversy. In a rally speech, he recognized to some degree that this whole thing is just a made-up, fabricated way to rile up the right-wing base. Listen to this.
It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes. People go like that. Talk about transgender. Everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was? But one.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what the hell it was. Now it's the number one issue in the DeSantis campaign. Oh, it's woke, it's transgender, it's gays. All right, so let me get to the Supreme Court decision that also pertained to gay Americans. Now, in order to have standing before a court, meaning you have the right to bring a case before a court, the plaintiff must show an injury in fact. Remember that phrase, an injury in fact to their own legal interests. For instance, Rosa Parks sat in a bus seat that was designated for Caucasians. She was arrested. They took her to jail. She was fined. All right, the case Lawrence versus the state of Texas, which legalized sexual activity between consensual adults. Lawrence went to jail. I don't know the explicit sexual act he had, but he was observed having gay sex with another man, and he went to jail. Griswold v. Connecticut, which gave us the right to buy contraceptives. There was a doctor in that case. He was giving out contraceptives. He was arrested and went to jail. They all had injury in fact to their own legal interests, even beyond their own legal interests. It was injury to their freedom. They were locked up. Now, there's a case with a Christian website designer who claimed in her legal pleading that she had been contacted by a gay man who wanted to have her create a website for his gay wedding. And she, under Colorado law, you cannot discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation. Now, when they went to court, it was discovered that the case is about an imaginary website that might or might not exist in the future. This woman hadn't even, as far as I know, created websites for marriages. So she imagined, oh, someday I might want to do this. It's about an imaginary same-sex couple that did not exist, nor request an imaginary website for their imaginary wedding. And the whole conflict exists, in my opinion, because of the imagined existence of some guy up in the sky who incinerates gays because he doesn't like them. And the Supreme Court, you know, they give cert, meaning that they decide to take a case. They don't have to take every case. There are so many cases, but they decided to take this case, although there was no injury in fact. And they took this case and they found for the Christian website designer. The only thing that exists in this case is the Christian political organization, American Defenders of Freedom, I think it is, who pushed this case into the Supreme Court. And the resentment and hatred that some people have for gay Americans. You know, the Roberts Court already had a verdict before they even deliberated. They just needed a court case to come to them. I don't know. Websites? I mean, so suppose you give the website person all of the written stuff you want in there, all of the pictures that you want in there. What is their personal contribution? They go to a computer, they put up the information you've given them, they put up the picture, they ask you to choose a template. But I saw these two, they were on the Smirconish show, and grinning, you know, like the cat who ate the canary. This whole thing, this whole case was just a way to find other ways to ostracize, to make the other, to deem. It wasn't about free speech. They say, oh, this is free speech now. Free speech? When you have DeSantis firing a prosecutor who did nothing but say something, never did anything. You have DeSantis punishing one of the largest companies in America, and certainly the largest employer in Florida, because their CEO said something. You have books being banned because they say something. You have librarians being fired because they authorize books that say something to be in their library. Don't force anybody to read them. Just have them. And then you tell me this case is about free speech? And one of the lead lawyers in this case was also someone who had been one of the leading lawyers in the, I always mispronounce it, mifepristone, well, the anti-abortion drug case, where they actually looked for an anti-abortion judge in Texas, Kaczmarek, and they brought the case there so he could strike down the administration and the distribution of this abortion drug. And guess who one of these leading lawyers in both cases was? Josh Hawley's wife. Here he is congratulating her. Major victory to free speech and a religious liberty today. Proud of my wife, Erin, who litigated this case. And you think this is about the law? It's not about politics? When she steered the anti-abortion drug case to Kaczmarek, and she was one of the leading attorneys in that case, he didn't recuse himself, even though he had made a donation to Josh Hawley's campaign. He's congratulating her. He's congratulating her because she entered a false statement into her pleading as a plaintiff before the court. And that was either deceptive or it was irresponsible, indicating that she did not do her due diligence. You're supposed to, you're not just supposed to grab things from here and there. You're supposed to look into them to make sure these facts are verifiable. That's one of the things that got Giuliani in trouble and disbarred. Because he was flooding the case, he was flooding cases with information that simply was not true. And he did not do due diligence to confirm those facts. Well, she didn't either. There is no gay wedding. There is no gay man asking for a website. All right. So the other case was affirmative action that we talked about. Clarence Thomas, of course, this has been his bête noire for years. He's tried to get rid of affirmative action, even though he conceded, and this is a quote from him, God only knows where I would be today if not for the legal principles of equal employment opportunity, critical to minorities and women in this society. These laws and their proper application are all that stand between the first 17 years of my life and the second 17 years. Well, when he went to Yale Law School, they had initiated, actually they had quotas. They wanted to reach a percentage of their law students that was 10% African American. Now, listen, I understand why they're saying, oh, we've made progress. But for them to say that we have a colorblind society is ridiculous. And the latest Supreme Court justice said that. With let them eat cake obliviousness, the majority announces colorblindness for all. But deeming race irrelevant in law does not make it so in life. And I think her statement stands. She probably wouldn't be on the Supreme Court. Neither would Clarence Thomas. Probably Obama might not have been admitted to Columbia or Harvard. If not, it doesn't mean that he was less capable. Michelle Obama, too. The way our world has changed in many ways, Black newscasters, Black politicians, Black members of news organizations. In fact, I've found that the most articulate people that speak to me, people like Jamul Bowie or Obama or Elijah Cummings or Stacey Abrams, all of whom have advanced college degrees. They're my favorite people, other than Pete Buttigieg, who is gay, who articulate the problems facing America. Now, a lot of this is based on what the Federalist Society has done, and there are about 6 ways that you could interpret the Constitution, and of course it has to be interpreted. You can't just look at the words. You can't just look at the history and know, oh, what was this guy thinking when that happened? For instance, to pick the most obvious and repeated example, what is cruel and unusual punishment? I mean, what we're talking about today are these judges going back to 1789 and saying, well, what did they have then when they made these things? I'm reading this book. It's called Worse Than Nothing: The Dangerous Fallacy of Originalism by Erwin Chemerinsky, who is a law professor at Berkeley. And an interesting book. I don't want to go too much into it, but one of the things that has been said about originalism is that it's like going to a cocktail party that's crowded and jammed with people, and you scour the mob looking for your few friends who might be there to try to find them. Yes, history is a grand buffet, and you can pick something here or pick something here. You want a good example? All right, there was a recent case at the Supreme Court called U.S. Term Limits versus Thornton. In that case, some of the people in the majority opinion cited Joseph Story, who was one of the early Supreme Court justices. He was the youngest Supreme Court justice in our history, 32 years old when he was appointed to the court, I believe, by Thomas Jefferson. And he's esteemed as a great jurist. But Clarence Thomas derided his inclusion in the majority opinion because he said, yes, he's a great thinker and whatever else, but he wasn't around when the Constitution was created, so you can't use him as a source. Now, he was also in the minority opinion now for the other case about Moore v. Harper, which was the independent state legislature opinion, where they were going to say that if the legislature wants to pick electors, the court can't, or redistrict, the courts cannot overrule them, basically striking down judicial oversight on the state level. Guess what? Clarence Thomas cited Joseph Story in his minority opinion. And, the people in the majority, it didn't go unnoticed. They mentioned this. On one hand, you're saying we can't refer to him as a constitutional authority because he didn't create the Constitution. And now you're saying that he's one of your sources. Give me a break. All right. So, Trump has brought up one of our old bugaboos, communism again. And in his rallies now, he's talking about the infiltration of communists and Marxists, he calls them Mark, into our society. Take a look at this clip.
I will also order our government to deny entry to all communists and Marxists. Look, we have Marxists, fascists, communists, they're pouring into our country. We are going to deny them access to our country. Now, the one problem is, what about all the ones we already have that happen to be politicians, okay? Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, Schiff. How about Schiff? Shifty Schiff. Liar. What a liar.
Schumer is a Marxist? Nancy Pelosi? Come on. This is like Trump's greatest hits, bringing them back out again. The communists are flooding into our country, and the markers. Oh, we must be wary of the markers. Now, the reason I brought that up is because I want to talk a bit about talk radio. And Jay Diamond, who's one of my best friends and was one of the few on New York City talk radio who actually made you think about things. I hope that I was another one, but that's up to your decision as a listener. But when I was growing up, my parents loved Bob Grant. He was on, we had a radio in the kitchen, a radio in the bedroom, a radio in the bathroom. He was on every radio in the house. Of course, he was on MCA, I think, and then WABC. When he was on MCA, though, he was tempered by Malachi McCourt, who was a communist, and there was Leon Lewis, who was a black radio host who used to ring a bell whenever there was a first-time caller. And Bob Grant, actually, the first radio show I hosted in New York City, I got a call from Bob Grant. He was going on vacation, and he asked me to sit in on his show. He was on vacation. And I still remember my guest was Malcolm Wallop, who was the U.S. Senator from Wyoming. That's right, Wyoming. And even Bob Grant, listen, it's hard to say that he wasn't a racist. He was. I won't go over some of the things that he said on the radio right now, but he was also a talented broadcaster. And people listened to him. Look at how my parents, when he spoke or had a book signing, my parents would rush to it. So I grew up with Bob Grant. And then eventually when I had a TV show, he was several times a guest on that TV show. And he was the #1 radio talk show host in New York City. Well, back then, even in 1991, when we asked the question, should we ban communism in America? Take a look at this.
Guests now, I know, have a contrary point of view to the Communist Party, as you'll see in just a moment. Anthony Imperiale is a former state senator from New Jersey and says that communists contribute absolutely nothing to our country. And Bob Grant is the most popular radio talk show host in New York. He's on WABC Radio, and I'm sure he has slightly different views as well. Please welcome them to the show. Beginning, I pointed out unemployment at its highest levels in about 10 years, very high in the New York metropolitan area. We have a terrific problem with homelessness and people on the streets, with poverty. We have a problem making ends meet in terms of paying for a higher education and making it accessible to all people. The communists say that their system can solve a lot of those problems.
To say we have problems, of course we have problems. There's no utopia anywhere. And to say that the government is going to do anything or give anybody anything, it's a fallacy, Richard. I'll tell you why. Because the government doesn't produce anything. The government takes from the people to give to some of the other people. And why does it do it? Because the government does not produce. The government cannot give you anything unless it takes away from somebody else.
But I know the communists would say that a lot of the capitalist class, the upper class, does not produce either. That's one of your arguments. 1% of the country owns
36% of all the wealth.
36% of all the
wealth.
The whole
pays
system.
a tiny percentage of the tax. So Bob's rallying against taxes, but he should rally against the taxes against the working class and stop the privilege taxes.
See,
for
here
the
they
rich.
go with the polemics, the jargon, which is meaningless, which is a laugh right now. If we were having this discussion a couple of years ago, I might be very incensed. But now I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying seeing these pathetic creatures here,
you too.
who probably in their heart of hearts, at least 2 or 3 of them I suspect in their heart of hearts, know that communism is a failure. But hey, this is America. I don't want to outlaw the Communist Party. I want people like this to come on programs like this to show the American people how lucky we are. And let me say this, Richard. You could talk about homelessness. You could talk about unemployment. And guess what? Everybody wants to come to America. I don't see anybody breaking his neck to get out of America.
The Communist Party led the way for unemployment insurance.
I'll
The
try.
Communist Party advocated Social Security before anyone. It was called a socialistic system. Now it is practiced. The Communist Party said that the government has a responsibility to help those when they had hard times. That was the meaning of unemployment compensation. It was called a socialistic idea. Now it is integrated. These are the things the communists brought forward.
Okay. Does anybody here know what central planning is? It was the keystone of the communist economic system. What it meant was a commissar in Moscow would tell a factory in Vladivostok they had to make 100,000 pairs of gloves. They would make the gloves, and then nobody knew what to do with them. They had no orders. Nobody was buying them. Nobody needed them. And then next year they would get another order
because there
for
was no supply
100,000
and
pairs of
demand.
gloves.
The marketplace didn't work under the precepts of supply and demand, right?
There was no such thing as supply and demand.
But let me ask you this too, Bob. And I've never asked you this. Do you believe that housing is a right or a privilege that you get when you work and pay your rent?
Well, I think housing is a privilege, a right. Hey, look, give me one of those fancy schmancy places up in, where is it, Saddle River? Hey, that's my right. I'm an American citizen. I'm going to walk in there, knock at the door, and say, give it to me. Come on, cut it out.
I mean,
And besides, I didn't say there was anything wrong with somebody living better than somebody else. I want to live better than you. How does that grab you? But I want to work for it. I don't want somebody to give it to me. But the point that I want to make is there's no hypocrisy here. An executive says, I'm getting an executive salary. A baseball player signs a contract for $5 million a year to play baseball, and everybody says, isn't that great? Roger Clemens is a great pitcher. Look, he's making all that money. I begrudge it because I think it's silly to pay a baseball player. Right. But this is America. This is an open society.
There's a new attitude here. I know when I first started acting, let's say, I joined Screen Actors Guild in the 70s. I had to sign a statement that said I was not a member of the Communist Party. And you know what? I thought that was un-American. You know who that was initiated by? Ronald Reagan, who later became president. Right. Why couldn't you be an actor and be a communist? But in those days, people thought communism was a threat. Anymore, do you find it a threat? The Soviets have outlawed communism. Should we? Do you still feel threatened by it? Give us a ring at 201-480-VOTE. Press Y for yes, press N for no. We'll be back in just a moment.
All right. Yeah, that's a true story. I mean, when I first got my job in a film, I had to join Screen Actors Guild, which was the union. And they said, you've got to sign this declaration that you have not been and are not, nor will not become a member of the Communist Party. And I said, why should I have to sign this? I said, as an American, shouldn't I have the right to join a party? And they said, if you don't sign that, you don't work. I signed it. Anyway, thank you for signing in to Richard Bey Talk one last time. And I do appreciate it. Remember, share this on Facebook. Subscribe if you haven't done that already, and you'll never miss an episode. And tell your friends about it if you enjoy it. Thanks again for watching, and as always, all my best. Take care.